you for joining us tonight. We'll be talking about the Exodus and the 10 plagues of Egypt. The story of the Exodus is one of the most exciting and entertaining in all of Scripture. And within the Exodus, we have the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt. The 10 plagues of Egypt were so imaginative and so destructive that we still talk about them even to this day. We refer to them in stories, we refer to them in music and in literature. And what we'll do today is we'll talk about, were these events just brought up randomly? Was God just trying to come up with something worse than the next plague or the last plague? Or was there actually an order to the plagues? And what we'll discuss is that in these plagues, each plague was specifically targeted to an Egyptian god that was worshipped. So using Scripture as our guide, we'll be using the English Standard Version. And using the curriculum taught by Liberty University's Dr. Ed Henson in his Old Testament survey class, we will actually discuss how each plague was a form of striking at an Egyptian god. The 10 plagues of the Exodus were designed to cause the Pharaoh to let God's people go out of bondage. They were attempted to strike at the Egyptian gods, and they were attempted to show the entire world and all of history God's omniscience and omnipotence and His glory. And in the minutes that will follow, I will briefly discuss certain pieces of Scripture referring to the plagues. For the sake of time, I will not name all of them. I will then discuss each individual plague and the God that it combated, and then we'll wrap up with a small discussion on the glory of God and the power and might of God, and how He is a Lord that we are to not only appreciate and love, but to fear and respect. The plagues upon Egypt begin in Exodus chapter 7 and run all the way through to Exodus chapter 11. And in these events, we see stories like Exodus chapter 7, 14 through verses 25, where the water is turned into blood. We see stories in Exodus chapter 10, 21 through 29, where darkness covers the whole land of Egypt. And he's actually discussing a darkness that is to be felt. The first plague is the river Nile being turned to blood. And here we have a medieval drawing that depicts the Nile River being turned into blood. And as we see, even thousands of years later, even medieval art talks about the wonders of the 10 plagues. Now, Osiris was the Egyptian god of the Nile. So when the Nile was turned into blood, this was a direct strike against the Egyptian god of the Nile. The next 3 plagues were the plagues of frogs, the plagues of lice or gnats, depending on which version of the Bible you read, and the plagues of flies. And these went against the gods Hecht, Seb, and Kephra. The next 3 plagues were the destruction of the cattle and livestock, boils and sores on humans and animals, and finally hail or fire from heaven. These plagues targeted more notable gods. Apis and Hathor were the gods of cows or cattle. Typhon was the god of health, and Shu was the god of weather. The final 3 plagues were the worst plagues: the plagues of locusts, the plagues of darkness, and the plagues of the death of the firstborn in all of Egypt. The plagues of locust went against the god Serapis. The plague of darkness and death went against the 2 mightiest Egyptian gods, Ra, the sun god, and Ta, the god of life. At the end of this amazing event in the 10 plagues of Egypt, God stands victorious over the great gods of Egypt and over one of the mightiest nations known at the time. God reigns, the people are set free, and the Hebrew nation is able to form, later sending us the Messiah, Jesus Christ. God was able to do this by sending one plague after another, each increasing in severity, until the Pharaoh had no choice but to let his people go. And the Pharaoh's gods and the Pharaoh's magicians stood no chance against the Lord. And what we need to remember and what we need to take away is that even though our God is a God of love and our God is a God of mercy, and He sought us out to have a relationship with us, and His Son, Jesus Christ, died on the cross for us, we also need to remember that this is the same God that can destroy nations. This is the same God that can destroy evil with one breath. And this is a God that we need to love and adore, but this is also a God that we need to revere and worship. And just as the proverb says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Thank you very much.